Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Curator's Corner here at the National Civil War and Naval Museum. I am Jeff Seymour, curator and historian at this great facility. And ladies and gentlemen, we have got a great addition to the museum right here behind me. After working for several months with the U.S. Navy, they have graciously allowed us to have on loan the best torpedo collection anywhere. Now, what's a torpedo? Well, a torpedo is what we today would call a mine. Now, of course, back then they didn't have a reference name for these contraptions or these infernal machines as they became known as. So where do they go? Well, they go to Latin. Let's figure some way to name these things. So they came up with the word torpedo, which actually is derived from electric eel, believe that or not, electric eel, to strike as if by lightning. So that's where the word comes from. So if you understand that. Now, during the Civil War, the use of torpedoes, they are basically stationary, as opposed to, oh, we've got these submarines that shoot torpedoes through the water. That's actually going to come along just after the American Civil War. But during the Civil War, we've got several different kinds of torpedoes. We've got spar torpedoes. These are at the end of a long stick or spar, like the Hunley torpedo. Or we've got free-floating torpedoes. They're made in kegs. They come in all sorts of contraptions. They sit in the water. So we've got all sorts of variations of these things. And yes, they did have torpedoes that were on land. They were called subterra torpedoes, landmines. So there are examples of those. So these things come in incredible varieties, and the Confederates were particularly using these all over the place to defend their fronts from the attacks of federal forces. And interestingly, the United States forces, even though during the war the Confederates used torpedoes against them very successfully, U.S. Army personnel laid out subterra torpedoes, landmines, around Fort Sumter and their defenses in April of 1865. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we get too much further into this video, I wanted to let you all know that these are perfectly safe. These are all reproductions. There is no live munitions here, so I'm not as crazy as some people might think. But anyway, these are all reproductions, and they were created by a guy named Mike Koshin, who is a retired machinist mate from the United States Navy, and he spent years researching and developing this collection. And with the help of the U.S. Navy, the History and Heritage Command, we were able to bring these here to the National Civil War and Naval Museum. One of the greatest pieces in this collection is this contraption right here. This is the torpedo that was on the end of the spar of the Hunley. And the Hunley is the first submarine to sink an enemy ship in combat, and did so through the use of a spar torpedo. You've got 95 pounds of gunpowder inside this metal keg, is basically what it is. The contraption, this torpedo, was attached to the hull underneath the hull of the USS Housatonic, and exploded by the use of a lanyard from inside the Hunleys. There's a little bit more to that, but that's essentially what happened. So this is a reproduction of that torpedo. Now, ladies and gentlemen, right here in front of me is an interesting example. This is a Demijohn. Inside is a big glass container, and they would fill it with gunpowder. And you think, how is this going to work? Well, it floats. It's one of those free-floating torpedoes. It's attached to a couple of pieces of wood to provide buoyancy. So here it is floating in the water, and you'd think sailors on one of those ships moving along the waterways would look and say, hey, what's that? Let's mess with that. Well, don't do that. This particular kind is electrically detonated. What? Electrically detonated? I didn't stutter. You have a line of wire copper wire and so forth, and is attached to a detonator from the shore. And you run an electric charge through there and boom, you blow up your target ship. One of the many ways that the Confederates are coming up with to sink those ships. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, right here is probably the most famous torpedo you've never seen before. This is what's known as a Singer-Fretwell device. Singer-Fretwell, the two guys that came up with this contraption, they first started working in Texas and then began operations all across the Gulf. Well, Singer you may have heard of before, but this particular Singer is Edgar Singer, and he is the nephew of the more famous Isaac Singer of sewing machine fame. But anyway, this particular Singer, E.C. Edgar, him and John Fretwell began working on these devices. And this is the type of torpedo that the USS Tecumseh struck during the Battle of Mobile Bay, leading to that famous quote, "Damn the torpedoes." This is the type that the Tecumseh struck and went down with. Simple design, actually. It's metal, but the design is for the ship to hit this plate, come flying off, and tripping this mechanism here, which sets off a mechanism inside the torpedo and blowing up the gunpowder. So this is what sank the Tecumseh and what leads to "Damn the torpedoes." Ladies and gentlemen, you may be wondering what I'm doing standing here with a box of candles next to a torpedo exhibit. And that would be a logical question. So let's take a little bit closer look at this particular box. You see, it's not really a box of candles. It is a torpedo. Look at this. Inside, you've got a timing mechanism, which makes this an orological torpedo, or time bomb. Orological, hours. Funny how our language works like that. But anyway, this is a reproduction of this mechanism, and inside you would have the gunpowder. So maybe about 12 pounds of gunpowder. Oh yeah, it's not really candles at all. Well, what happened? A Confederate agent on August the 9th, 1864, walks up to the docks at City Point, Virginia. Now, City Point, Virginia is where the Union was bringing in their supplies to the Union armies of Grant working on the Overland campaign against Petersburg. So the siege of Petersburg has already started, and all of that's going on. One of the largest supply depots in the world. So you've got all these ships coming in. So this Confederate agent walks out to the docks and hands this box of candles to a dock worker and says, "The captain said to put this on your ship." Well, it happened to be a ship with munitions for artillery. So about an hour later, remember this is a time bomb, an hour later, this device explodes, blowing up the munition ship and blowing up a ship on either side of it, and also blowing apart part of the whole dock facilities there. And you've got shrapnel and pieces of artillery shells going off up on top of the bluffs, and several men were killed in the explosion as well. Well, it's a time bomb, and it worked perfectly. Union forces, most people did not know that this is what made that explosion. They just thought it was an accident at the time. So it wasn't until after the war that they found out exactly what caused that. It's a time bomb, an orological torpedo. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an example of one of the smallest torpedoes that you will find from the American Civil War. It looks like a piece of coal. Exactly what it's supposed to look like. It's a piece of iron cut to look like a piece of coal. But you'll notice that it has a hole here on the back, or bottom, however that works. And it would be filled with gunpowder, and it would be sealed over and tarred over so nobody would have an idea of what was going on. And then it would be thrown into coal, so just nonchalantly when the coal heavers are shoveling that coal into a ship's furnace into that boiler to heat up that water, to, the steam engines, this thing would boom, and that's the whole idea. Interestingly, one of these was found on President Jefferson Davis's desk. And when Navy personnel were in the Confederate White House right after the end of the war, there it was. They scooped it up and kept it, and there is that surviving example that exists out there. But again, these are the types of links that Confederates were going to in order to help win this war for them. And it's one of the more nefarious but interesting parts of our American Civil War. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you like this edition of Curator's Corner, please hit that like button below and visit us at our website and any of our other social media sites. Please join us. Our website is www.portcolumbus.org. And remember to visit our museum to see this great collection, and we've got some more exciting news coming in the immediate future. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, and join us again for Curator's Corner.